Good morning, good afternoon or good evening everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and to another instalment in the K&SV and Scenic Valley Railroad. In the previous instalment you may have seen me get the benchwork framed up under the main yard. This week I'm going to tackle that dreaded transition from the east helix into the yard area. Just as with the west helix, it proved quite difficult to get it right, and I learned a few things in the process. So without further ado, let's just head out into the workshop and get busy.
Well, in preparation for adding the top end of the helix in, I have trimmed down the last few spacer blocks on the table saw. So you can now see they are the same height as the reduced ones. If you recall, many episodes ago I cut a step in this one to allow for the transition to the thicker roadbed. Of course, I can't start framing it yet because I've still got to add some more track and foam roadbed. So let me get that done quickly and then I can continue with the carpentry. Well, with 4 lengths of rubber roadbed, 8 yards of flex track and 16 feeders installed, now I'm ready to continue with the woodwork. The first piece of sub roadbed is already temporarily resting in place. All I have to do now is install it permanently. I had to get a little inventive with the framing in this corner. It's another one of those areas where it was virtually impossible to work out in advance. I had to figure out as I went along. This piece is behind the backdrop, so it doesn't matter about how high it goes. So as you can see, it's just shaped to give clearance over the helix. I'm almost ready to install the plywood top in this area. Although before I can do that, I have to install a little bit more roadbed and one more piece of track. So let me do that quickly and I'll be right back. Well, that is the yard area just about sheeted. I've still got a bit missing here, which I can't be bothered to do today. I haven't worked out this curve yet. That's just approximately right. I will retrim it later. I'm still working out the area at the top of the grade. It's quite complex. The plywood is designed to be at the right height to put foam on the top of it. Although this curve that I've just drawn is about ½ inch inside the deck for the helix. And that's why I'm going to have to cut the plywood and then splice in another piece higher up using thinner foam. I'm not quite sure what the numbers are yet. I've still got to work that out. Initially I designed it for ½ inch foam, but I think I'm a little bit low. I think I'm going to have to go and get either 3/4 or 1 inch. I mean, I did deliberately err on the side of caution, on the side of being too low, because I can easily put thicker foam in. What I can't do is put thinner foam in and still work. So don't go away, I will see you then. This morning I am going to continue where I left off yesterday. I may have mentioned that I ultimately need to cut the plywood on that curved line to give clearance for the helix. But before I do that, I need to get the end framed in. I need a piece of framing to support that piece of wood hanging off that loopy piece that I put in yesterday, but also resting on blocks supported from the helix. That probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now, but I will show you a picture of it when it's done. I need to do all that before I cut the wood out, because at least right now it can tell me where it needs to go. So let me get on with that and I'll be right back. Well, here I have part of the full-size track plan laid out in the right place. As you can see, I've already started cutting it up in this area. This piece here is what I need to add to the top of the helix. Originally I was going to break it in this area, but I decided against it. There's a mass of crossovers and I really don't like having extra rail joints in the middle of crossovers. Instead, I realized that by cutting one of these number 8 turnouts in half and putting half on each section, I can solve all the problems. And as long as the joint is halfway between the heel of the fixed point blades and the frog, it'll still work. So anyway, that is my decision. It solves all the problems, and this is a good example of why these full-size track plans are so valuable in certain situations. Just being able to figure out what to do here on the benchwork has probably already saved my client more than the cost of the full-size print. Well, here is the arrangement I was trying to describe earlier. I have this bracket on the helix and another one similar to it on the other side. They can't be quite the same because of the grade on the helix. You'll notice they hook up differently. Anyway, this is now permanently installed, so I am now ready to cut out the plywood above the helix. I still need one more of those brackets in the middle, but that'll be easier to do once the plywood is cut out. Well, I've just done a test with some critical cars, and although it misses, it is too close for comfort on the inside. The outside curve has plenty of tolerance, but I'm going to cut back the inside about another ½ an inch, just to make sure that I'm not going to run into problems later on. I've replaced this piece of sub-road bed at the top of the helix with a wider piece because I realised from the plans last night that the curve starts opening up slightly at about that point that you're looking at now, and is slightly further forward at this point. It's only 1.5 inches, 2 inches. So this piece of sub-road bed will give me enough tolerance there. I've also cleaned off all the tools from the work area so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm thinking that right now it might be worth going inside and getting the full-size plans, laying those out, just to see what I need in the way of sub-road bed in this area. So let me go do that, and I'll be right back. Well, this piece is now trimmed in all the critical areas. It's still wide. The idea being that I wanted to make it wider than necessary, just in case I want to extend it all the way to the fascia. I don't quite know where that is yet. At the moment it's just temporarily clamped with a spacer to the end of the stringer that is eventually going to be cut off at the end of the next frame. In order to get it properly installed, I have to create outriggers to cantilever it off the side of the helix. But I also have to do that for the fascia. I'm thinking it makes more sense to get the fascia in the right place first, because then it's an easy matter to put risers in off those same brackets. Otherwise I'm going to be doing everything twice. So I think I will start in this corner where I can get in the only straight piece of fascia that goes around here. I might as well start with the straight bits first and then work towards the curves. So let me change tack and get back to work. Well, I've pretty much got everything worked out and about half the pieces installed. Next thing I need to do is build one more bracket in here. This post is the first part of it. There'll be a T-piece at the top to hold the sub-road bed and the fascia. I'm not quite sure whether I need to cut this off now or leave it until later. More than likely I still need it until the stiffener for the fascia is permanently installed. Well, this morning is Tuesday, June 28th, and it's been almost a week since I've been out here because I had a severe gout flare-up and I haven't been able to walk. I do get it occasionally, although it's never been that serious before, and I can't remember where I left off, whether I made a recording before I went in last time. So I'm just going to assume that I haven't and do it again. I am in the process of framing in this corner. I started in the back by the end of his workbench, and this framing will support the fascia all the way around. These two curved pieces will be cut off where they overlap, and I believe this bracket has to be cut back as well. And then this piece of sub-road bed at the top of the helix will be cut back when I know exactly where the fascia is going.
and the top of the helix will end right here where this saw cut is part way through the framing. This is the end of the adjacent frame that I finished at the beginning of last week, and this will eventually be cut off, but at the moment I think I still need it as a temporary support while I'm working on the permanent framing. So let me get back to work and figure out what I was doing, and I'll check in with you again later. Well, I have this bit framed up now. I had a long pause at this point because I wasn't convinced that I would be able to get this joint apart. You see, this frame cannot be slid the other way at all, and it has to go in after the helix is firmly located in the room. And it seemed that every scheme I came up with had one problem, which resulted in it not working. So eventually what I decided to do is leave a 1/4 inch gap between the frames at this point, and what I'll do is slide a piece of plywood into that joint before I put the bolt in. That way when I take it apart I can pull the plywood out, giving myself some tolerance. And if the fascia gets mangled during dismantling or reassembly, well, that's not the end of the world, because the joint will have to be spackled anyway. Well, this bit of road bed is properly installed and rock solid. I've got the paper template back out again. Of course, the fun and games hasn't ended yet. I still need another piece on top of here. I think another layer of plywood on top of this, continuing the grade upwards, is going to be a lot easier than tapering the foam. So I need a piece about 3 feet by 13 inches. And it will also bridge over this trench. All the track back to here will be on that piece of plywood, and then the rest of it will just get 1 inch foam. Well, this was an awkward piece of road bed to get right, and it was complicated by the fact that it wanted to bend the wrong way. If I'd realised that ahead of time and used it the other way up, it would have been a lot simpler. So what I've had to do is put a lot of shims in. I believe it's now right, although I have taken the precaution of not gluing it down just in case I have to adjust it. So I think I can now roll up the track plan, get the pink foam out, and then put it back down at the right height. So let me work on that and I'll be right back. Well, I have the first piece of pink foam cut. Since it's not flat, I made sure that I put it on in such a way that it was dished rather than humped. That way, as long as I know that the edges are properly attached, I won't have any humps in the middle. I have screwed a block of wood to the back corner to use for locating. So I'll just make sure that it's firmly against that corner and the ridge at the back, and then I know it's in the right place, and then I can push the front down. Because with the contact adhesive used properly, I only get one shot. I have removed the test cars and stuffed some scrap paper in the hole so I don't get glue on the track. And I have also run a strip of masking tape down the adjacent benchwork so I don't go on to the next frame. I think anywhere else that I might get overspray, it just won't matter. Anyway, I avoided the brand that didn't work last time. If you recall, on the Misabi and Western, I had a problem with the Gorilla Glue not only letting go, but melting the foam, even though it was clearly specified as being foam safe. Well, it looks as though the first piece of foam went in very well. I did have a little moment of panic when I'd almost finished spraying the adhesive down, and then I realised there were some temporary screws that hadn't been removed. So I got rid of those quickly, and it went down properly first time. I am going to leave the screws in along the edges just to be on the safe side, although I don't think I need them. Here is the second piece that has been cut.
just a 16-inch wide strip. And on the surface that might look like a very simple piece, but let's turn it over and we can see that I've had to cut out a trough to clear the top of the helix, starting at nothing at this end and almost the full depth of the foam at the far end. We can see my double stack and auto racks. The double stack is the tallest vehicle here, and that has plenty of clearance at this end, but I need an extra 3/4 inch above the plywood just to be safe. So there is definitely a lesson to be learned here. I got caught out, and that is if you place a yard right at the top of a helix, the grade needs to extend a lot further than you think it does. See, even though the main line clears the helix right here, there's still another 1/4 of a circle of grade rising up under the yard. So basically your yard needs to be an inch higher than you think it does. I originally lifted it 1/2 inch just to be on the safe side, and obviously that 1/2 inch wasn't safe, which is why I now have 1 inch foam in here instead of 1/2 inch foam. They say everything's a prototype, and of course if I'd known that when I built the helix, I would have started it slightly lower down. But it's okay, it still works. The yard elevation is still within acceptable limits. So let me go away and glue the next piece down. I'll be right back. Well, the second piece is now permanently glued in place. I do have another sheet of foam which will do this corner, but I want to get the rest of the plywood in first. And of course, since I am now going with a thicker foam than was originally planned, this sub-road bed along here is at the wrong height, because I want to go back to using 1/2 inch foam on this frame. Here, I do have to redo the grades around this corner, but that's no big deal. I can still reach all the screws, and I'll just put shims in. Anyway, first things first, I've got to get the plywood in here. And I just looked at my watch, and that's probably the last thing I'm going to be able to get done today. But let me do that quickly, and I'll be right back. Well, that piece of plywood is all I'm going to put in today. I've got to make sure that I remember to back out those screws along the splice plate before I cover them with the foam. As I mentioned earlier, I nearly forgot on the other one, and it would be a real pain to have to get in there and grind the points off if I would forget to back them out. Well, I'm back out here again on Wednesday morning. I have cut this panel to length. Originally I was considering running it the other way down here so as to splice this joint. I don't like stacking material joints on top of each other in the 2 layers, but this is a very good smooth splice and it won't be a problem. The deciding factor was that with the pieces that I have available, running it the other way would have meant that I needed to put it on in 3 pieces instead of 2. So I'm doing it this way now. Well, this corner board has now been covered in foam, so that is finished. I am going to have to raise this plywood sheet by 1/2 inch because I don't have enough 1 inch foam left in stock. So I am going to raise it so I can use the 1/2 inch foam as originally planned. Well, this piece of plywood sub-road bed has now been raised 1/2 inch and the grade adjusted. As you can see, I haven't gained the full 1/2 inch at this end because this whole grade is now going to be a lot shallower than it was. I'm not going to put the blue foam on today because once again I have another splice plate where I need to let the glue set and then back up the screws.
Well, that's all for this week. Hope you enjoyed the show. Next week I'll be able to tackle something a lot easier. I hope to see you then. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.